Ladies and gentlemen, it is Thursday morning and we're hanging out with the one and only Scott Ritter.
Oh,
Let's go. Hello, Garland Nixon hanging out with Scott Ritter. And yes, sir, we got all kinds of sounds now. We got one for our great guest. We got a word from Keir Starmer.
you got anything for not so great guests? You got the booze?
Let's see. How about this? Yeah, we can give them a punch or two. So, or let's see. Oh, better yet.
Be careful.
All right. So let's get going. Oh, did we lose Scott? Oh, no. I think Scott is frozen. Scott is frozen. Doggone it. Are you there, Scott? Oh, there we go. All right. I better watch using all of those. I think
we got what we're doing. We're pissing off the CIA here.
Yeah, exactly. I think they didn't like that one. Here's the CIA. Yeah, we'll give them a big boo. All right, let's get going. Let's start here, everybody. Before we get rolling, we got to find out what the heck Scott Ritter's up to these days. You can go to scottritter.substack.com or just go to scottritter.com and find out what Scott, he's got Trump Watch, the Russia House, Ritter's Rant. What's happening, Scott? What are you up to when all your fine works?
Well, we're in the middle of a campaign right now. It's the Project 38 campaign. Project 38, of course, is a reference to a documentary film that I'm making, 38 Minutes, which talks about the 38 minutes of terror felt by the citizens of Hawaii when they thought a nuclear missile was inbound. And, the movie asks two questions to the audience. If you could go back in time 6 months from the time this missile was going to hit and kill you, what would you do to prevent that missile from being launched? And then the final question is, why aren't you doing that now? And 38 minutes is my answer to that. What would I do? I'd go back and try and create arms control agreements that brought stability to the strategic nuclear array that exists in the world today. And I am doing it. And we are mid-campaign. We, the campaign kicked off with the.
Uh-oh, Scott's locking up on us this morning. The CIA's up to no good. Doggone it. This is not, I don't know what's happening. Maybe I can try. A lot of locking up going on. I don't know what's happening with Scott Ritter. Well, Scott, if you can hear me, hopefully you can, because you're locked up, then you can sign out and sign back in. Maybe that'll work. Let's try this. Let's sign Scott out. There we go. He's gone. So hopefully, Scott, it sounds like he may be having it sounds like he may be having some let me try to text him. He may be having some internet problems there this morning. And so I will text Scott and ask him to sign back in. That's the thing about it. That's why we appreciate everybody who, there we go. He may, and then again, he may just simply be, just going to just put sign back in. He may be having internet problems. That's the thing about, doing the online stuff. And, we don't have the, massive funding, and we don't have the internet. I mean, the, space-based technology and all kind of satellite techs and stuff like that. So, we have to do the best we can. Sometimes there's dogs barking in the background. Sometimes there's workers working in the background. And other times we just have internet problems. So we'll hold on. We'll cross our fingers. Scott Ritter should be back. We're going to talk about a couple of things today. We're going to certainly talk about the, hopefully we'll hear Scott will talk about the, what happened in China, the SCO, and the significance of that. We will also talk about, we'll talk about this business about security guarantees. Until Scott gets back, I'll talk about that, the security guarantee business, and that is the delusions, if that's really what it is in the EU about security guarantees, just absolute delusions. And is it really delusions? I'll put it to you like this. There's two ways to look at it. One of them is that the European leaders, so-called leaders, are deluded and they truly are living in some dream world, and they truly believe that they'll be able to do security guarantees and they'll be able to put troops in Ukraine. And of course, the plan would be obvious there. The plan would be obvious. It would be, we will put troops in Ukraine, saying that if Russia attacks again, then the Americans have to come in, and then we can drag the U.S. into a war with Russia. That would obviously be the plan, at which point, as soon as they got everything set up, they would immediately fire missiles at Moscow. They would fire stuff at the Russians so that the Russians would have to retaliate. And then they would say to America, oh my God, there was an unprovoked attack on the peacekeepers. America, you're the security guarantee. You're the backstop. Your job to come in and go to war. So it's so obvious that it would just be a ploy, because the security guarantee or backstop of America would be what? What are they saying when they want a backstop or security guarantee from America? We hope Scott will be back in a minute. We hope. All they're saying is this: when we get in, if the security guarantee, the backstop, if we get in a war with Russia, America then comes in and joins the war. And by joins the war, what they mean is the European troops have no money, they have no troops, they have no tanks, they have nothing. So what they mean is, we'll get in, we'll start a war with Russia, and then the United States will come in and fight it for us, and we'll get the hell out of the way and watch them get killed. That's all it is. That's their so-called security guarantee of troops in Ukraine is, how do we start a war with Russia and get the United States to fight it? Nothing more, nothing less. Oh, I see. There you go, Scott Ritter.
We got to, this is sort of serious but funny. Ever since the FBI, came to my house, there's just been this routine shutting down. It doesn't make any sense. It has nothing to do with the router upstairs that's functioning, but it's as if they have to remotely reset something, and it disrupts the. We even swapped out the hardware. We got new routers and servers, but they do it from right outside. They go in and they play stupid games and all that. So I apologize to your audience for this. It's just, there's nothing I can do about it, because literally, it's just it regularly happens whenever I'm doing a podcast. It's just an automatic disruption. Bam, shut it down. All right, well, screw them. We'll just power on. I think I was talking about, in the middle of this project. I just got back from Russia. Russia was a very important part of Project 38, because a key aspect of Project 38 is an effort to, gain access to the president of the United States. And I have to make it a case as to why the president would want to meet with me and other people about these issues. And one of the best arguments is that we support his policies of trying to improve relations with the Russians. And by going to Russia, we demonstrate the importance of citizen contact, civilian diplomacy, and this short 1 week long trip that I made to Russia. It's interesting. The Russians have likened it to an information bomb. And what they mean is that it's set off in Russia. These interviews I did, this work I did, was the week leading up to the Alaska summit. And it literally captured the attention of the Russian people and the Russian government to the extent that many people thought that I was a U.S. government information operation sent in to help prepare the Russian people for better relations with the United States, because they were like, well, we're having conversations we've never had. We're having dialogue we've never had. And it's all about improving relations. And the Russian people were all on board. No, this was just serendipitous. my trip was conceived to get under the 50-day window that Trump put out there. Remember, he was going to sanction Russia in 50 days. My goal was to get in there before the window hit. And then after I made the trip, or planned the trip, bought the tickets, he changed it to 10 days. And so the day I arrived was the 10th day. So I was coming right into the storm. So I thought, well, this would be cool to see what happens, to be there when all hell breaks loose. And suddenly when I land, nope, there's a summit taking place. And so for the week leading up to the summit, it was just pure catch up. Nothing pre-planned. This is not a Russian government operation. It's not a Scott Ritter pre-planned operation. This was Americans and Russians working together on developing a dialogue to promote the betterment of relations. And this is so essential to what we're talking about here. And so, as you're seeing there, the Russia House, normally it's a subscription-based service off of Telegram and also the Substack. But for this, for this series of the Russia House, we've made it publicly available. We've put it out on my Substack. You can subscribe to my Substack free of charge if that's your desire. And you can see all of these interviews. We put them out on X, again, free of charge. And the whole idea is to get people to listen to the Russian voice, to hear the Russian perspective, so that they're not as susceptible to being infected with Russophobia, which is, of course, the great problem right now. We've got an entire government staffed with Russophobes, people who hate Russia. And by becoming engaged here, citizen engagement, citizen diplomacy, we create an alternative to the Russophobia. We create, Russian reality, fact-based truth, not in a way that promotes, Russian policy objectives, but rather promotes peace, American citizens' objectives. What is the objective of the American population? To go to war with Russia, to commit nuclear suicide? No, Americans want to live in peace. They want to have stable environment to raise their children. The best way to do that is to have normal, stable, peaceful relations with Russia, good relations with Russia. And that's what this is all about. So we've started this operation. There's more, a lot of work left to be done. There'll be a big meeting in Poughkeepsie of what I call the Poughkeepsie Peace Initiative. One of the things that happened out of this trip to Russia is that I wrote a letter on behalf of the Poughkeepsie Peace Initiative to Donald Trump, telling him that we're on his side, we're working to help him succeed, and that we can report from Russia that the Russian people want him to succeed, that they are on the side of peace, and that anything Donald Trump could do to promote peace is supported by the Russian people and by the Russian government. And so now we've created that. We've got more work to do. There'll be another trip to Russia, again, to continue this process of empowering myself and the Poughkeepsie Peace Initiative and others who may accompany me with knowledge and information so that we can promote peace, and also to continue this success we've had with influencing the Russian people. I mean, they don't have a reason to like us. Actually, they have a good reason to not like us. And by engaging with them, we actually help prepare the ground for peace with the United States, for better relations with the United States. It's a challenge. Don't know if we're going to succeed, but I damn sure know this. If we fail, it won't because we didn't give it every effort possible. And again, I just want to point out that none of this would be possible without the support of the audience here and other audiences, the people, because, this isn't something that's funded by the Russian government. It's 100% funded by me and the work I'm doing and donations that are made. So, anybody who thinks, well, why should I donate? Well, you donate to give us the opportunity to create the potential for, no nuclear war, better relations with Russia. And we're having a real impact. This isn't, trivial academic stuff where people are going, well, I donated, but I don't understand what's going on. Guys, it's right in your face. We're having great success, and we hope to have more success. September 27th, there'll be a peace rally in Kingston, New York. That's where we kicked it off, Operation Dawn, last year, and we'll be doing it again this year to talk about the potential of peace, to get citizen engagement. And it's all because of the donations and support of the audience. So thank you very much. And Project 38, the movie, it's underway. Again, thanks to the funding, we now have begun production, and We now have the ability to do video editing and to do sound and music and all the important stuff. And so I'm excited. I mean, this is like things are happening. We're moving forward, and it's all good.
One of the things I was chatting about while you were gone is this whole security guarantee business, right? That is nonstop. Here was my position. The plan, obviously, if you can even call it a plan, would be to, okay, we're going to get some troops in Ukraine, and America's the backstop. And we just say, okay, America, if somehow we militarily get engaged with Russia, then America comes in and goes to war with Russia. And as soon as they got in, they'd start firing at Russia and say, they're shooting at us. Time to get, I mean, it's so obvious what their game is, but it's absurd. I think, really, Scott, it's absurd. They don't have the troops to put, even if the Russians said, sure, send 10,000 troops, they'd be lucky to find a dozen, and they'd have a revolt in each of their countries, and it'd say, oh, hell no, let's not. And their militaries would revolt. So, I mean, I think the UK has somewhere between 20 and 40 operational tanks. They couldn't take a small neighborhood in, the suburbs of Moscow with that. But here's my point. I think the biggest thing of this is just to throw a monkey wrench in any hope of discussion between Russia. And they know Russia will never say, yeah. They know Trump has been like, screw this. How the hell can I get out of this crap? And mainly it's just, let's keep saying things that will throw a monkey wrench in any possible negotiations. And I think that's their game plan more than anything else. Security guarantee delusions. Your thoughts, Scott Ritter?
Well, it is delusional. First of all, what part of no NATO in Europe do people not understand? Because, let's look at the nations that are screaming the loudest about putting troops on the ground. The French, the British, the Germans, the Poles, they're all NATO members. And so what Russia is to say, there can be no Ukrainian membership in NATO, but we're going to go ahead and let NATO deploy 60,000 NATO troops on Ukrainian soil as a security guarantee, which makes Ukraine a de facto member of NATO. We have Ursula von der Leyen out there saying that the Ukrainian army today is literally the first European army in the modern era. It's been trained by us. It's equipped by us. It takes directions from us, and we need to use it properly. I mean, this is Ursula von der Leyen saying we need to use the Ukrainian military properly. Well, again, the implication is clear that this is European/NATO control of the Ukrainian military in a post-conflict environment. You might as well just call it NATO and get it over with. The Russians have said that not only is there no NATO membership, but they've also said two other things that are quite important: demilitarization and denazification. And when you look at the implementation of both of these, that means that there can be no large NATO military on the ground, Ukrainian or otherwise. The Ukrainian military today is estimated to be between 800 and 900,000 troops. The Russian plan is to take it down to around 50,000. None of these troops will be NATO trained. None of these troops will have NATO equipment. This will be more or less a border guard force. That's it. That's all Ukraine's going to get. And, oh, by the way, it'll be commanded by probably Russian generals initially, and then you'll have a transition to loyal Ukrainians because the concept of Ukrainian neutrality is out the window. There's people talking about European neutrality models. Let's look at the models that they're considering. The Finnish model. Finland's a part of NATO. There goes that concept of neutrality and perpetuity. Sweden's a part of NATO. There goes the concept of neutrality. Austria, the famous Austrian model after in the 1950s. Gone. Austria's talking about joining NATO. Switzerland, the ultimate of neutrals. They're no longer neutral. They've killed over. There is no European neutrality model that works. Which means that the Russians are going to impose the Russian neutrality model, which is going to be linked to some concept of the Union State. The Union State exists between Belarus and Russia, political and military and economic, unity. And I think that's Ukraine's future. Ukraine will become the third sister. There's two sisters right now. Ukraine will become the third sister. And that's just the reality. Play stupid games and you win stupid prizes. And Ukraine played the dumbest of games of all by allowing themselves to be used as a European proxy to, to sustain a broader strategy of bringing down Russia. So there will be no security guarantees, not in that classic sense. The best security guarantee that Ukraine is going to have is to be a neutral state leaning towards Russia. Neutrality means that, they're not going to have this big military. Russia is not going to use them to, this isn't the new Soviet Union. There's not going to be a Ukrainian military ready to launch. No Russian forces are going to be based in Ukraine ready to invade. But it means initially neutral. Putin came out today and said they can join the European Union. We never said no to that. But the reality is that, when the costs are going to be associated with the reconstruction of Ukraine are going to be so high that the European Union, of course, will balk because the European Union is not going to pay that price. Russia will, because Ukraine is a Slavic nation, a fellow Slavic nation. And there are plans in place to deal with this. But that means now that Ukraine will economically align itself with the Russian-Belarus axis. And when you have that kind of economic alignment, what comes with it is, political alignment. And with that political alignment comes security guarantees. Russia will guarantee Ukraine's security. And people may say, well, that's funny. Well, it wasn't Russia that created the conditions that killed 1.7 million Ukrainian soldiers. It was the West. People tend to forget the role that the West played in, facilitating the emergence of Ukrainian nationalism as a dominant political power in Ukraine. The role that the West played in the 2004 color revolution. Nobody talks about that. It was like 2014. Well, guess what, guys? They did it first in 2004. Yushchenko came in, ultranationalist. First thing he did was make Stepan Bandera, this pig, a national hero. And it empowered these people. And the 2014 was just, a continuation of these policies. The murder of Russians in Odessa, the rape of Mariupol, the shelling and slaughter of children in the Donbass. This was all done by the West. And so, what people need to understand that, the security guarantees, the best security guarantee Ukraine can get is for Russia to say, never again will Europe use Ukraine as a proxy to try and take down Russia. This isn't about Ukrainian independence, Ukrainian sovereignty, Ukrainian democracy. This is about, Russian security. And Russia's security is dependent upon Ukraine not becoming an outpost for it. Look at other things Ukraine, Zelensky has said, well, the best security guarantees we can have is for us to develop long-range strike capabilities. We want to build, these Flamingo missiles. We want to build Neptune 2s. We want to build other missiles. And that way, these are our security guarantees so that if there's ever a conflict, we can strike deep into Russia. Well, gosh, talk to Ray McGovern about this. He speaks quite eloquently about, the discussions that took place between the United States and Russia in 2021, early 2022, about, what Russia wanted out of Ukraine. Russia wasn't looking for territories. But one of the things Russia said is we can't allow Ukraine to be a member of NATO, and we will never allow Ukraine to become a base for NATO-style weapons that can strike deep into Russia. So here is Zelensky, the dumbest man on the planet, saying, yeah, my security guarantee is to develop the very capability Russia said they will never allow to exist on Ukrainian soil. So I think what we can safely say right now is that everything that Europe's talking about, everything Ukraine's talking about just doesn't matter because it's irrelevant. Putin said it today. We would like, or I think yesterday, we would like peace. We're ready for peace. But if it's peace that doesn't meet our needs, then we will finish this war using military means. And that's what we're doing right now. And that's the reality, ladies and gentlemen. There is no Trump peace plan. The only peace plan that Trump could put in would be to accept Putin's requirements. In order to do that, though, Trump is going to have to learn to say no to Europe, no to NATO, and hell no to Ukraine. The good news is Europe doesn't matter anymore. Look at the Europeans. They've come out and said, we can't deploy troops. Ursula von der Leyen's out there moving big armies on a map, and it took the Germans to say, yeah, she doesn't have any say in this at all. What she says is meaningless. You have Zelensky with Macron right now in France talking about the coalition of the willing, but it's a coalition of the unwilling, because France and everybody have now committed that they will not put troops into Ukraine because they don't have any troops to put in. And they can do nothing without American backing. And Donald Trump is out there fantasizing about, we might fly some airplanes over every now and then. No, you won't. But there is no plan. There is nothing. The only security guarantee that Ukraine will ever get is the guarantee of Russian security once Russia wins this war, kicks NATO out of Ukraine, and imposes its will on what's left of Ukraine.
I think you're right. I think what Putin's saying is kind of a version of the Malcolm X old quote where he said, be nice to everybody and respect your family, respect your friends. But if somebody puts their hands on you, put them in a cemetery. And say, hey, we're going to be nice. We want peace and all that kind of stuff. And I tell you what I was thinking of. This guy named Andre Perubian. You familiar with him? The Banderite guy. And
just
a couple
got
days
in the
ago,
head.
somebody walks up behind him. I'm not saying it was the Russians. Could have been an internal, arguments amongst the Banderites, whatever the case. But I just think that's the future for these Banderites. It's denazification one way or the other, pal.
The guy, they caught the guy who's confessed to it.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Ukrainian father who said, you mobilized my son.
Oh, really?
And so I'm going to kill you. And he's confessed. He said, of course I killed him. He's a threat to my family. He's a threat to my son. This is the man who is responsible for it. He said, I would have killed, if I had been in another city, I would have killed Poroshenko, the former Ukrainian president. He picked a target of opportunity. But the point is this is the beginning of the end for these people. Everybody who promoted, you don't bury 1.7 million bodies and not have millions of people who are furious. And when it comes out, the truth comes out about the role played by these Banderas, by these Ukrainian sellouts, by Zelensky's dead man walking. I just hate to say it. He has no life expectancy. He will die violently because he has committed so many sins against the people of Ukraine. So has everybody in his cabinet. These are all dead people because the Ukrainians will not rest until justice is brought. You don't bury your sons. You don't bury your husbands. You don't bury your brothers. You don't bury your cousins and then just walk away and say nothing. You will bring the wrath of God down on these people. And this is what we saw. Again, I'm not condoning it. I prefer justice. I prefer, arresting them, trying them, making their crimes known to the public, and then using whatever punishment is deemed appropriate. The Soviets found fit to do a mass hanging in Kiev in 1946 to get rid of dozens of collaborators. And I think that would be pretty cool to build a giant gallows and put all the Banderas necks in them and stretch them. But that's just me. But the point is, these people will not have happy endings. All the money they stole, they're not going to be able to spend it. They will be hunted down one by one by one. If not by the Ukrainian people, damn sure the Russians are going to get them. Russia will never admit to this. That's not something they admit to. But justice will be had. You remember the idiot pilot that killed his crew and defected to the Ukrainians? He went off to Spain to live in happiness, and he got killed. Nobody's admitted to it, but we know what happened. And this is going to happen to every single one of these people. There will not be a happy ending for these people. This ridiculous Ukrainian parliamentarian, Gorchenko or something of that name. I'm sure I'm butchering his name, but he's the guy who in Odessa in 2014 encouraged the deaths. He worked hand in hand with the guy that just got popped. And he's the one that's going around kicking the bodies of the Russians that jumped out of the burning building to ensure they're dead. Is this one dead? Let's make sure. Ha, 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 ha. Yeah, well, someday somebody's going to be kicking your dead body sooner rather than later. And it's going to happen to everybody. There is going to be a bloodletting, unlike anything that's ever been seen, because when this system collapses, it will collapse totally. Zelensky, pro hint, dude, stay in England, change your name, move often, because you're a dead man walking. Every Ukrainian knows the role you played in facilitating the slaughter of their children. And not only that, you're a Banderist. You literally just published a paper trying to position yourself to be president, which encouraged the Ukrainian people to send their children to Azov summer camps so they can be indoctrinated in the Azov Nazi ideology. Nah, Azov is history. Banderas is history. History in Ukraine. This is something I think the Russians will do. They made a mistake in 1954. They crushed Banderism. Hundreds of thousands of Western Ukrainian nationalists fled Ukraine into diaspora in the West. Hundreds of thousands were put in the Gulag as political prisoners. And then a few years later, Nikita Khrushchev let them all out. And they returned to Ukraine, where they began a CIA-backed process of re-insinuating themselves into Ukrainian society. So they were the shot callers. They were the ones making the decisions. They were in the positions of authority and power. They didn't identify as Banderas. No, they sort of hung out in the shadows. But this is the reality. Russia will not make this mistake again. I think this is why Naryshkin, you remember the meeting that Naryshkin had, the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service, earlier this past summer, where they said, what's the future of Ukraine? And one of the things he said is, well, one way to denazify is to turn Western Ukraine, a homeland of the Banderas, over to the Poles. And the Poles are like, yeah, well, we love that because we love nothing more than to bring these bastards to justice. I mean, right now there's a big problem with the Poles. They're saying that Ukraine must, exhume the bodies of the people who were killed, account for it, apologize for it, build memorials to this, and they're kicking people out. They used to welcome all the Ukrainians, but vast majority of the Ukrainians are Banderists, the Western Ukrainians, and they said anybody who talks about Bandera, we're sending back to Ukraine. The Bandera problem was so big that the Germans, when they were receiving Ukrainian soldiers to be trained, they had to put up notices in the barracks saying, hey, if you got a Nazi tattoo, you got to cover it, and you can't sing the Nazi songs, and you can't, run around with Nazi flags. You guys, you can't do that. This is Germany. Even the Germans understood. They were training literal Nazis, but they had to fake it to make it. Poland won't put up with that. And, now they have a new president who is really hardcore on this issue. And Russia may take advantage of that. That's part of their denazification process. But this is the reality of Ukraine going forward. It's over. It's over for the Banderas. There will be no large NATO army. Ukraine will be a defeated, conquered nation. And then Russia will rebuild it and bring it into the family of Slavic nations where it belongs. Ukraine doesn't belong in the West. George Soros in 1993 wrote a paper that said that the goal here, in defeating Russia, isn't to use NATO troops, because nobody wants NATO troops coming home in body bags. He said we need to find a source of Eastern European manpower and let them come home in body bags. Well, they found it in Ukraine, 1.7 million so far, 90,000 a month, 625,000 so far this year. And it ain't getting better. All these people that think that the Russians are dying, the Russians are having the lowest casualty rate since the war began. Ukrainians, yes, they're killing Russians. This is high intensity conflict. And the Russians are suffering, 150, 200 deaths a week. Tragic. That's what we suffered in Vietnam, at our max level, by the way, and it broke the will of our country. So it speaks volumes to the resilience of the Russian nation. But Russia can recover, can absorb these losses, and they are absorbing these losses while increasing their combat strength. The Ukrainians can't absorb the losses that they're facing right now. When they have 800, 900,000 men and you're losing 90,000 a month, and this doesn't include desertions, 500,000 desertions alone this year. The army is disintegrating as we speak. And so, I'm not going to pick a day on the calendar, but I'm just here to say that, the inevitability of Russian victory, total Russian victory, is absolute. And now I think the key problem facing the United States is how to manage this properly so that you don't ruin the prospects of improved U.S.-Russian relations. Because as Russia demonstrated in China last week, they don't need us. They don't need us. They'd like to have peace with us, but there's literally nothing America can bring to the table where Russia goes, oh, wow, that's a game changer. Should have thought about that. Oh, man, hey, can we redo this? Russia looks at everything and says it would be nice to have stability with America. It'd be nice to have economic relations with America. It'd be nice not to have a nuclear arms race with America. We'd love all these things, but we're not gonna make these major concessions that you're looking for. The day of America using arms control to create a superiority, a strategic superiority over Russia, which the New START treaty, which I'm encouraging people, both Russia and the United States to extend. Anatoly Antonov, the former ambassador of Russia to the United States who negotiated this treaty, he said, in retrospect, it sort of sucks, this treaty. We're not happy with it because America negotiated in bad faith. And we now recognize this. And, this treaty works to America's advantage. We will eventually need a new treaty. But in the meantime, he acknowledged that having a cap on deployed strategic nuclear weapons is a good thing because it prevents an arms race. But, we need to have good relations so that we can have good arms control treaties, fair and balanced arms control treaties, so that we don't have the threat of nuclear war.
Well, I had a while back, a long time ago, I talked to a guy who's Ukrainian who said, yeah, my family doesn't speak to me because they're Banderites at home. He's like, my own mother doesn't talk. He was talking to me. And he said, this was, and people that watch my channel a lot will remember me saying this. And the guy said to me, there will absolutely be a civil war in Ukraine when this is over. And I asked him why. He said, because there are a lot of people that are going to say to the Banderites, look what you did to us. Look what you've done to our country. Look what and he said, and there will be people who want to go around. He said, the slaughter that's happened in the past, they'll have to stop it because there will be people who want to go around and slaughter the Banderites and kill them all and angry at them, so he's like, there will be a civil war. And I'm like, wow. And he was like, not, oh no, possibly, maybe, I think. He was like, there will absolutely. I'm from Ukraine. I grew up, and he was naming the places that he lived. And he's like, in this place, I've been there. I used to go there. I went to school here, naming all these places, saying, when this thing's over, it's going to be bad in Ukraine, and it ain't going to be the Russians doing it. And that makes sense in light of the Andre Perubi and some. Here's the thing about it. You're kidnapping people's kids. Somebody looks and they see that you kidnapped their son. They're kidnapped him, beat him up, threw him in a wagon, and the next thing you know, they get a letter, he's missing in Bakhmut. Yeah, you know what? There's people that at that point are going to say, well, I got nothing to lose. I'm paying somebody back. Some of them may not even care. They may just see any general official that's been, or, whatever, whoever's been involved that they can put eyes on, they're going to put a bullet in him. That's the reality.
When you take hope away, for instance, what does this father have to live for now? You've taken his son away. So the only thing he could do now is bring justice to it for his son. And I think you're going to see more and more of this. People are they have nothing to live for now because you took away their future. And that's the thing. The Banderas have taken away the future of Ukraine. Women who lost their husband, sisters lost their brothers, mothers lost their sons. These people have nothing to live for now because you took away their future. And so when you take away the future, you take away hope. And when you take away hope, all that's left is revenge. And there will be revenge. I mean, this is not a good thing. And I think it's incumbent upon Russia to figure out how to nip this thing in the bud. Because as you said, the real risk of just Ukraine ripping itself apart after the war ends it's a real risk. There's going to be the need for, stability operations. And, Europe doesn't want to get involved in that. Could you imagine a bunch of European peacekeepers running around Ukraine while the Ukrainians rip each other apart?
And blame the Europeans. And there are going to be Ukrainians saying, you dragged us into this. You threw us in a cage with a bear. And you told us that once we got in the cage, if the bear mauled us, that you were going to come in and help us, and you didn't help. They're going to be heavily armed. They're going to be furious. There's going to be a refugee crisis pouring into Western Europe of heavily armed, Banderite, crazy people who want revenge on the Europeans too. It's going to be a conflict zone.
And the Europeans are going to help them out by taking the troops and putting them in the middle of Ukraine. It's like, no, I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Let's talk about what happened in China. A couple of things that are huge. And, the real big one is the Russians and the Chinese signed this gas deal that's like 50 billion cubic. The world's never seen anything like this. And there's this alliance built, which just strengthens this alliance. And you see other countries looking, saying, "Hey, get me! I want to get in that." Other countries are looking at it. Mongolia is like, "You mean all we have to do is shake your hands and say, put it through here, and we'll get billions of dollars for doing nothing?" Yep, count me in.
Count me in. Best deal in the world.
So now all these other countries are looking, saying, "How can I get a piece of this action?" Chinese are like, "Hey, look at all these new weapons we have. We've got industrial capacity." The world has taken a turn, obviously, over the last week or two, and the steering wheel was in Tianjin or wherever the heck it was, Beijing.
It's interesting because this gas deal has been in the works for a number of years now. It proposed over 6 years ago, I think, initially. And the Chinese have always been a little bit reticent about it because they're like, that limits us. It puts us too compliant on Russia, too dependent upon Russia. We want to play the market more. We're this global actor. We don't want to, tie ourselves down. And so they've always been hesitant. There's been a lot of talk about this, but there's been some hesitancy. And now, thanks to Donald Trump, in American policy, the Chinese are like, yeah, it's a good deal. We're going to take it. And this is a lifeline to Russia. Literal lifeline to Russia. Yeah, they're not selling as much gas as they were to Europe, but they don't need to because they're selling more oil to India. They've diversified their customer base, and so Russia is now literally can survive without Europe. There's no more need for Russia to secretly be saying, "Hey, we could open up Nord Stream." Hey, we could do this. First of all, Russia is supplying Europe. What do you think Turk Stream is? Turk Stream, goes through Turkey into Southern Europe. And there's still the Nord Stream potential, which if there's a new German government will become reality. There's still a functioning pipeline. It exists. So it's not as though Russia will never be supplying energy to Europe directly. We know they're doing it indirectly. One of the great ironies here, Garland, is that all this gas that Russia's sending in, because they have a Siberia 1 pipeline that's already, that gas gets used by the Chinese, but it also goes to ports where it's liquefied and loaded onto these giant liquid natural gas ships, who then jump in the ocean, work their way down the South China Sea, across the Straits of Malacca, all around the Cape and out South Africa and up into Europe, where they offload this Chinese liquid natural gas to Europe at 5 times the cost of what they would have paid had they bought it directly from the Russians. It's Russian gas, but it's going to Europe on Chinese vessels. It's called Chinese gas. Europe is so stupid, literally, that I've never seen a greater collection of economically moronic people and morally corrupt people. I mean, if you're a politician, how dare you do this to your people? How dare you? And yet this is what France has done to the French people. Germany's done to the German people. The British have done to the British people. Europe's done to the European people. And Russia's just, this is a huge deal. It's what, a 30-year deal. It locks Russia in. And now it gives Russia the ability now to exploit other things. I don't know, people keep calling themselves Russia experts. Are you following what Putin's doing in Vladivostok at the Far East Economic Forum? The things he's saying? They're talking about coal and developing the coal resources there for energy. And, there's ways to develop coal so that it's clean. And the Russians now have the luxury of resources to do this. So, this Siberian deal now frees Russia up tremendously. It solves a whole bunch of economic problems for the Russians. And it also decisively commits Russia to the eastern pivot. Any hope the West ever had of Russia, sort of halting that pivot and looking wistfully at the West, it's gone. It's finished. Europe's finished. And this was a death knell for Europe. This is Russia taking the heel of its boot off the neck of Europe and just snapping the neck. Europe has made itself truly and utterly irrelevant. And you hear it in the desperation of the rhetoric coming from the Europeans. I mean, the pathetic Kallis, our favorite, Baltic
The Nazi
troll.
princess, I call her. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Nazi princess.
She's like, how dare the Chinese and the Russians talk about winning the Second World War? I mean, there is history. And if you know your history, you know these things. We know that your father and grandfather were Nazis. We know that the people that you promote today inside your country are Nazis. You tear down the memorials to the Soviet soldiers, the Red Army, who liberated you from Nazi Germany. Instead, you put up memorials to your countrymen who fought alongside the Nazis, and you say that's a good thing. We know that's the case. We know that you don't want to acknowledge the 27 million dead Soviets or the 20 million dead Chinese. And the sacrifices made by these countries in defeating the combined threats of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. I mean, she's literally a moron, and yet she's there. I mean, one would think they would have impeached her a long time ago and thrown her out, because every day you think she couldn't say something more stupid than the day before, and then she goes and proves you wrong.
Yeah, it's these people are a joke. And I think the last thing I wanted to ask you about, for for the last few years, everybody's been talking about how far will the Russians go, and this general unveiled a map. Nikolaev was on the map, Odessa was on the map. It was kind of a message, and the message is, the old whatever, I forgot the guy's name that said, the weak suffer what they must, and the strong do what they can. It was, we're Russia. We're going to take what we want. Nobody can do about it. We're looking at you, Nikolai, and Odessa, and they don't have to go in and bomb them. Once they decapitate the military and political strength, they can walk in anywhere they want. There's going to be nothing left. And from the looks of things, all of these attacks, then the Ukrainians running their mouth, Nikolai, Odessa, and God only knows what else. I think they're going to make that land bridge up to Transnistria. They're going to take what they want, and that's going to be anything good that they want. They're taking it. They're taking the Black Sea coast. They're taking everything. That's my opinion.
Well, Putin. The sad thing for Ukraine is that had they accepted Putin's peace deal in June or July, Odessa and Mykolaiv would be 100% Ukrainian. That's just the reality. There may have been demilitarization taking place. There would have been demilitarization taking place. But, Putin wasn't demanding that this be part of the settlement. But now that Ukraine has made these, ridiculous statements, and they're promoting war and long-range strikes, one of the great mistakes made by the British and the French was to transform Odessa into a launch pad of offensive operations against Crimea and southern Russia, Krasnodar and elsewhere. So now, whatever the agreements will be, Odessa will be a Russian city, either under Russian occupation as part of a security buffer, because Russia said there will be a security buffer. If you think that the border is going to be where Ukraine joins Russia, think again. There won't be any Ukrainian troops within 150 kilometers of the Russian border. Russia will create this buffer zone that'll be patrolled by Russian soldiers under Russian occupation. And I think the fact is that, not only will Odessa be occupied by Russia, but it's going to be absorbed by Russia, Odessa and Mykolaiv. And it's essential to create, as you just said, Russia's talking about solving the root causes of the conflict. And the root causes of the conflict are people who seek to exploit, Russia, the Russian nation, perceived weaknesses in the Russian nation for their own objectives. Ukraine, even though it was a sovereign state, was part of the Russian nation. Vladimir Putin defined the Russian nation in a speech in April of 2005, where he said, I am the president of all the Russian people, not just the people who reside in the Russian Federation, but all the Russian people who are united by common language, history, culture, religion, etc. And so when Ukraine declares war on the Russian speakers of Eastern Ukraine, that becomes a Russian problem, a problem for the Russian president. And when you have Moldova and Ukraine and others, threatening this Transnistria enclave, this independent part of that. That is a Russian problem. And the only way to solve it is to link it physically with Russia and then absorb it. And that's what's going to happen. And I think that map is sort of evidence of it. I mean, the Russians don't do anything by accident, and that general doesn't have the authority to make that map on his own. That would be in the end of his job if he said, make that map, put it up there. Putin be going, what? No, you're out of there. Fire him. This was done on a decision of the Russian government saying, yeah, let's just go ahead and put him on notice, what reality is. And this is reality. And there may be another map made, because you might see a map. Right now, the Russians are, in Kupiansk. That's a big deal. If they take Kupiansk, they'll be able to take Izium. And if they take that, they'll be able to move up, and Kharkov may fall. And then, the Kharkov province may very well not just be an occupied province or oblast, but part of the Russian Federation, given the predominance of Russian speakers in that area. So again, the Ukrainians, they're just committing suicide. We don't know what's going to be left of Ukraine. We do know this: if Odessa is not part of Ukraine, then Ukraine is finished as an economic power, because they lose all of their potential. You deny them access to the Black Sea, and you deny, their functionality as anything other than an agronomy-centric nation.
Yeah, and here's the thing: the Russians, if they say you can have what's left of Ukraine because it's not worth having at that point, I mean, it's going to be nothing but an economic burden. And from what I've seen recently of the UK, France, and Germany, they ain't going to be in no position to take on new economic burdens. That's for sure. It looks to me like they're maybe months away from a complete crash anyway. At that point, the whole game is up. At that point, let's face it, when it's going, when Paris and Berlin and London start looking like, a zombie apocalypse movie, the idea of sending more money to Ukraine is not going to go over well, particularly when you're talking about governments that are going to collapse. Their governments are just on the verge of collapsing. Let me find. Oh no, go! My gosh, I lost it. Hold on one second. Here we gotta find. I don't think I can find it. Okay. I don't know what's going on with this thing. I'm trying to get back to Scott Ritter's. Won't let me. But I'll try here. There we go. There we go. Okay, so I want to, before we go, we're going to go back and let everybody know where they can find all of Scott Ritter's good works, where they can, of course, number one, and most importantly, you can donate. Scott's got a lot of great projects going on, so just go to scottritter.com, click on donations. There you go. And you can support Scott's work. And Scott, tell him, let him know everything that's happening with your website before we go.
Well, again, scottritter.com takes you to my Substack, and up there you see the various bars. So you'll see Trump Watch. We just did a good interview about the raid on Mar-a-Lago. We're getting ready to do one on the raid on John Bolton to talk about that issue as well. Venezuela is on the horizon. The Russia House, as I said, we've just published a whole series of interviews that came out of my trip. There's even more, but we had some problem with the English. We got to solve those problems. There's about 8 or 9 more interviews. Very interesting. Ati Aladanov, Mikhalkov, the Oscar-winning director, and others. Spot Rep, I don't know what the future of that's going to be. It was a weekly intelligence-based program. It'll come back, but I think right now there's just a lot of work. Some things might have to be put on pause because there's only so many hours in the day. Ritter's Rant is just my daily take on whatever pissed me off at that moment. Ask the Inspector, the weekly talk show. We just did a good episode last night. And then, the various books. I'm going back to Russia in November, And one of the things that I'll be doing is I'll be doing a book launch of my book Highway to Hell. It's being picked up by a Russian publisher, and it's going to be published in the Russian language. And we're going to launch the book in November, and that's part of, again, the process of preparing Russia for the potential of arms control. I mean, this book was published in English, and I use this book to promote that message here in the United States. But now we'll be able to do parallel processing in Russia. And, I don't know what we want to tell people, but, guys, there's a chance that some people might be able to accompany me in November. And if that's the case, then we would definitely need your help to help make this happen. It's essential that if we go to Russia, that we pay for the travel and the hotel on our own dime to retain, our independence and our credibility. But let's just hypothetically say if I were to offer Garland Nixon an opportunity to join me in Russia, anybody who thought that was a good idea, donate so that we can make it happen. Because it's something Garland and I have talked about. I don't know if I'm letting the cat out of the bag too soon, Garland, but it's not 100% guarantee because there's various stars that have to align. But this is important because what the Russians said is that they want to, and Garland's a big proponent of this. You've been talking a long time about, I call it the family of podcasts. You have another term for it, I think you use, but the concept is we have these independent media. I was schooled by I don't know if you know who he is, Patrick Lawrence, the writer.
Yeah. He's brilliant.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He and I were just in Switzerland together at a conference there. We got to get you to that conference, Garland. First of all, you'll love it. It's beautiful. People are great, but it's just a great 4 days of dialogue. But, I used the term alternative media, and he schooled me. He said, no, because alternative implies you give legitimacy to, if you're the alternative to the mainstream media, you give legitimacy to the mainstream media. We're not the alternative. We're the main resource. The independent journalists today are the only ones with credibility, the only ones with integrity. We are the main resource. And so what we're trying to do as part of this, antidote to Russophobia is to empower independent journalists. Right now you have New York Times, you have Washington Post, these horrible mainstream media. They have bureaus in Russia, and all they do is lie. Did you ever see the recruiting pitch that the New York Times put in for one of the stringers in Moscow?
No.
Must be able to promote like an anti-Putin agenda. You're a journalist, Garland today they talk about you in Russia, Garland. They talk about you all the time. They're saying they love Garland Nixon, but have you been to Russia ever?
No.
Oh, and you talk about, so wouldn't it be empowering to go to Russia, meet Russians, see Russia, gather, empower yourself with the knowledge and information? So if you guys want to help us, Garland, me, and others, become the replacement of mainstream media when it comes to the voices that influence decision makers here in the United States, rather than inviting a former CIA chief of station in Moscow to be your talking head, turn them off. Turn off CNN, who uses former CIA people. Watch Garland and others, myself. We're going to be telling you the ground truth. We are more credible about this topic than the mainstream media. And the way you increase your credibility is to actually go over and get firsthand experience. So Garland and I will be working on this. But I'm excited about this. And there's others that we need to get over to Russia too. But we can only do it if we have independence. We immediately destroy our credibility because the Russians would pay for everything. And I don't believe they do so with malice in their heart. They do so because they really want us to come over. But the way we open ourselves up to be destroyed by our enemies is to give them the possibility of creating the perception that we lack the independence. And so we've got to pay our airfare. We've got to pay our hotel. We've got to buy our food. And we can only do that if people help us out with donations. The donations have been very generous so far. I always hate to put the tin cup out there, but if you like what you're seeing and you like what we're doing and you want us to expand and continue this at this critical time. And we are in a very important period of time here where we are working to try and prevent nuclear war and an arms race. You gotta help us out a little bit. And I appreciate everybody who has helped us out to date. But let's just make this a campaign. Let's take Garland Nixon to Moscow in November. And we do that by people saying we're going to help underwrite the costs associated with that. You trust Garland enough to understand that when he goes there, he's an independent operator, that he's going to, think the way he thinks. They're not going to program his brain, but we got to get him to Russia. And that can only happen with your help. So that's it, Garland. I'm sorry for letting it out of the bag, but I felt like if we don't talk about it and we keep it on the back burner, sometimes things don't ever happen. The way you make something happen is to say, we're going to do it. And now there's expectations. We got to get her done.
All right, everybody. Let's hear from Scott Ritter. All right. Thanks, everybody. Remember, the most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.